don't have a flexible front-end situation, and they basically say, well, what's the future? We have some people planning long-term super yacht builds for delivery 2015-16, and they basically know that if we fix the front-end order for our yacht now, we'll have an old yacht in 2015. So that's kind of a topic that pops up, and mind you, the front ends are the most visible part. Of course, software content is even more important, we think, but what many of the users see, the captains and the owners, is that it's really the modern touch and feel of the yacht and the boat has a lot to do with what kind of front end do you have. Okay, so I open for comments on this topic, and then we can see what the floor has to say.
You want me to start? Yes. Oh, I take a short presentation. My name is Jörgen Emanuelsson. I'm from Sweden, and I run a few companies concerning around maritime and marine business, as close to helicopter as well. It's very similar problem or opportunities. The background was that I was meeting Geir and Christina more by accident, but 2004 I find out, and I have thought about it for several years, that what will happen in the future for us mariners. So I computerized my own private boat. I could see very clearly what would happen in the future. I was wrong because I was at least 5 years too early, and I didn't know about the word open source or nothing about that. So I tried to get all the language, the signals in, showed on a computer, and that computer was also a touch screen, which also was a new news for me, that you can use it that way. And it started, of course, with the analog signals that we use, for example, at radars. So we have to digitize, make them digital. But the major problem is that it's so fragmentary, all the information that we take in our boats, different signals from the engine and from the radar and from the echo sounder and from the VHF, which is analog as well. And I worked very hard with it. So I get one boat where everything was on one computer, and that small little computer was stolen from a helicopter, because in the helicopter business they were thinking in the same way. They have more restriction in the helicopter, and I just now learning and go for exam to be a helicopter pilot, and they are still on the same level as 2004, because they have more limits to put in foreign or different materials in the helicopter. We are more free to do as we want to do in the system at marine business. And I did it, and I presented to the industry, and everybody was beware of their own business. Everyone, Raytheon, Furuno, even they who delivered the maps. There is a lot of deliver of maps. Someone is it's authorized from the authorities. It's called International Hydrographic Organization. They are the most trustful maps, and it's a kind of standard in Word called S57, and now you can have it in Garmin since 1 year, but the decision was taken 1995 that this will be the ordinary system in the world and authorized. And I showed it to a lot of people, and everybody was agreed to me, yeah, this is the future. This is how it would be looked, and how you should work between human being and machine. Just present a screen, and it could be a touch screen, and just one button, on and off. Because that is our major problem when we're working on boats. It's too much button, and the only one who knows about these buttons is that who invented the buttons, you can say. So it's really a big problem. And I think you can think as other who looking in the vessel, there was a cruising ship going in, that the captain there knows about all the buttons. I can tell you a secret, he doesn't. That is a problem. And tomorrow they're going to invent even more buttons if nothing happens. That's the short.
What Jürgen showed us in 2005
I think.
was really a COTS-based navigation system in his own boat. So it was like very much a one-off prototype based on an ordinary PC, or ordinary and very good large screen, and a few components he had to pull together, custom-made, as it says, from helicopter business to get sensor data and so on. And basically, the cost of your system was about 20% of what, and with much more functionality. It wasn't as, if I may say so, sleek as some of the systems you could buy on the market because it was homemade, but it made the point. It was like a little bit like our demonstrator. But what happened then?
Yeah, people wrote, where can I buy this? You can't buy it. But it must be, can you build it? No, it's not my work at all. I have hard times to get this so long with my boat. I thought I could do a business of it, but it was impossible in that time. I know some super yachts that have also doing it, but it doesn't work so good together with the different signals. So I sold the boat to a navigational school who used the boat to the students. This is the future, and it's since 2004.
You can say we used Jørgen's example a bit when we started to study different custom-made systems in the super yacht business, and we could see about the same is going on. On one yacht, they had a smart guy who could integrate Google Earth into to some extent onto as an overlay on the navigation system, so and they could get the information with Street View about the restaurants and recommendations for the crew when they come in and so on. But it was all custom made, and there was no platform to disseminate, and about zero interest to share it with others. So it was again custom made system.
For mariners, it's a big problem. There is this, big distinction, either land or sea. But when you come into a harbor, what you're interested in is both. Right? You want to berth safely, see what's in the harbor. At the same time, you want to plan your evening. Crew want to go out. We're going to go to dinner. We're going to a party. And currently, really, it's not available apart from those homemade systems because it's either or.
So with that said, and it would be interesting to get Eddie's view on this, because we basically then said that this was one of the many sources that we could conclude that MARSA is missing. This kind of backbone is missing, where you can bring these things to the market and still have a competitive advantage and so on at the same time. In 2005, it was probably too early because the commercial interests were against this. They didn't want to share. They could see that they would be driven out of their current market, out of their current comfort zone, and there was no real reason, as some of the suppliers said, well, everything is plug and play as long as it's my brand. So they basically just produced more and more gray boxes and black boxes to be connected with their proprietary cables, and they made good business out of it. However, what we have seen recently is that the market or this reality has been catching up with these guys, so the complexity has grown to such a level, not surprising to us, that they can't pull it off in a financially viable way anymore. It becomes too buggy, too complex, too large, too difficult. So for example, one strong player in the market now, namely Garmin, not coming from marine, thought for a long time that we can avoid this marine nightmare and we don't want to have autopilots. So they kind of tried to stay away from autopilots, and that was not possible for them because that was kind of the missing link, and everybody of course got hooked up on the autopilot. So they also now provide autopilots, and it's probably made their product also complex. So how do you see it, Eddie, in your boats are? Do you have integration problems? Is everything fine?
Well, I think, as you've all been saying these last 2 days, there's still a lot of room for improvement, in my view, and I think everybody will agree with that. But what I would like to say is that I've been a long time with Sunseeker, 21 years now, so I have seen the beginning of the navigational system, which probably by this day they're in a museum. So there are things moving all the time, you know, with new ideas, with people like Fruno, Simrad, all of them. I do believe that what you are doing, the cloud, is a great opportunity, because our task starts when the client buys the boat. He decided on the boat. His wife then's gone through the fabrics. And then when it comes to the electronics, that's when the issues start. And this is the nightmare for every skipper. I think you'll agree with that. That he wants to have everything working right. Why? Because he could be with a client out cruising. He could also be on charter. And any problem that cannot be verified quickly, like the system I believe would do, we'll have an issue with that. And in that, I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and we look forward to seeing it on the market. As regards the marinas, I totally agree with you. I'm part of a company also that we do concierge service. I think I've told you about this. So we do have a set number of super yachts that come here that we have to prepare everything for them. However, the biggest issue is when it comes to mooring the boat. They ask us, we send them a Maltese guide and everything, which actually briefs them with where they're coming in, what the procedures are. But there's always an issue in mooring the boat. And I totally agree with you, Geir, about actually setting up a system where they can see the marina on their screen and actually see the berth, the particular berth they're going into. And in that sense, I think that would be a great help for the skipper, because at the end of the day, these are the people that carry the whole responsibility of the boat.
I live in a small island. It's a problem with berthing all the time, actually all the summer when the guest is coming. There's no building new houses on the island, but it's building a new shop, small shop in the harbor. And I said to them, don't forget to put a web camera here, who is public, so people can see here is space for the night. It's very easy, and it doesn't cost us anything on the island, or very small cost. And everybody see a lot of problem with this, but it's very easy. Someone have to do it. Just put it up and then put it on a homepage or whatever about birding, because birding is one of the major problem. Everybody thinks that everyone is an expert, and no one is.
Okay, about a bit more about the front ends. Maybe some comments from the floor, because this is of course the $100 million question. What's going to happen on the front end side? Anyone wanting to comment on this? Because that is a question we get very often. Nobody knows.
Then I have a comment. Since I used to try to fly a helicopter and have this license now, he also want to sell a helicopter. So I have taken in offer. And I also bought a new car in June. And this is exactly what the guy from US Navy says. The car dealer says, do you want the big navigational system or the small audio and navigation system? And I was thinking, no, I don't want to have it at all. I have an iPad up between the seats. Aha, you have an iPad. Yeah, then I have it upgrade all the time, and maybe I want to change navigational program, or maybe I want to get more interested in opera music or in email or something. So it ends up with that I have a contact for loading, charge the iPad. And it was exactly the same in the helicopter. The only difference is that the regulation says that you have to have, I think it was a Garmin down. Is it forbidden to have an iPad in it? No, it's temporary equipment. Okay, then I take in the offer the smallest Garmin you ever had, and then I want an iPad, place for an iPad. And this is exactly what the guy from the US Navy says. We change a hardware every third year. So that is as long, and I can understand what happened in the future. And maybe the solution is apps then for the hardware that we choose to have in the at the bridge. And then we maybe want to have some different sizes of the screen. Often very big screens we think is good.
My question, I guess, is, was the reason for that because the iPad was multifunctional, or because it was constantly upgrading? That you know, every week or so you would see a new app available and it would update the app that you were using?
Both. So the iPad is not important. The important is that I have the hardware. Bring with me. And when I want to look at the engine, when I buy the app, I take the iPad with me. They can't stolen the boat either.
We know that for the larger yachts and for the commercial ships, we have a lot of issues around class approval and very, of course, in many ways, understandable conservatism to what are we allowed to do, what are we not allowed to do. But I think Jørgen's example from the helicopter business is quite interesting, because we have heard voices saying that, okay, for class approval, you have to have this hardwired system, the radar has to be separate, da, da, da. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the only system on board. You could have other systems that in a non-intrusive way exist and present the data in a more favorable way to the operators and to the passengers. And the whole question is, how far can we push that? Can we actually go the other way around and say that the required by class system could be almost the smallest that you need, and the not type approved system could be the one that you actually use? Anyone wanting to comment on that?
The class organizations tend to be a very conservative bunch anyway. And as I was saying yesterday as well, type approval and class approval takes a long time, longer than sometimes the development period of the yacht itself. And yeah, so by the time that they've ratified a new standard or whatever, sometimes it's already outdated, and it's going to be very hard to convince them. I think it needs kind of they need a shock. They have to be woken up. They need a push. It's hard to find the right angle of approach to get that going. Now, the business I'm from is not really, class approval is not really an obstacle for us, because we do entertainment systems and IC systems, and they have nothing to do with class approval until you start linking them into other systems. But that integration, that link, is something that's becoming more and more relevant as more and more systems coexist. It becomes more and more interesting to try and integrate them somehow, and owners are becoming more interested in seeing this integration, because it's new, and of course they want the latest and greatest. And so the class approval consideration is definitely considered an obstacle at this point in time. But it could be an opportunity in time to come. So.
What we have.
I don't think the class approval is an issue, because if we could always start off with smaller boats that don't need a class approval, such as a typical 40-foot boat, and the market and the size of the amount of boats in that class is much greater. So if all the 40-foot boats have iPads on board, then automatically the class guys are going to say, wow, it's a trend coming up. And I think the tipping point for tablets on board is going to when we as mariners put some pressure onto the tablet manufacturers to make them, let's say, because there's no tablet currently exists in the market where you can deploy, like an iPhone or an iPad on a boat. There's no way you can control it in direct sunlight. Or you can use it if you're sailing with your fingers wet. So I mean, so until we come up with hardware that's marinated,
That's another. What we're trying to do here is that we're trying to use as much open source and COTS both hardware, software as possible, and then we will try to add that minimal marine layer to it, because we are a fragmented and relatively small business overall. Well, 30 million vessels in total is not very, very small, but very fragmented. And the idea would be that we try to provide something that makes it possible for us to harness all the rest of the global IT, global development, and then put a layer or an app on for the marine part. And on the front-end side, we kind of tend to believe that a way around this class approval thing and so on is to go a bit in the direction that the minimum requirement to get approval we have to provide in the old-fashioned way, but then as time goes by and they get experience with the very high quality of these systems, because in fact we know today that many of those hardwired old-fashioned proprietary solutions are less reliable and they run into more trouble than the currently COTS system would do. So that's what we're trying to. We're trying to approach this from different angles. And then the question is, how many specialized front ends do we need to have for marine? That's the thing we don't really know the answer to.
Can you clarify what you mean by front end quickly?
Basically means whatever you use to interact with the system. That being you seeing something, you're touching something, so it's really the user interface, you can say.
I think we all have to agree that the front end plays a critical role, if not in how modern the system is, how modern the system looks like. So there's definitely a big impact on the user perception of the actual system and the usability, because the user interface, how intuitive it is or it's not, will play a crucial role. So what we're trying to do with MARSA is to standardize this, this interface between the front end and the back end system. We're currently, for the demonstrator, relying on standard web services to interface between the various front ends and the back end, which is currently a MARSA instance. This will keep an open market for different front-end manufacturers to tap into this market and being able to control your boat with different hardware devices. The idea is, as you can see in the slides there, to finally get some version of a front end which is actually marinated, which has the right brightness, it is splash proof, it can withstand vibrations, so it's got no mechanical moving parts, etc. So I think that's the first move towards that direction, but we still have to see more driving force from the manufacturer side to develop such.
But from my perspective, the class approval issue is not an issue of the front end. It's what goes on behind the scenes, the systems intercommunicating. Of course, there is that aspect as well of the front end, but what class doesn't want at this point in time is systems that can control your navigation system from outside. The navigation, and it's a closed system, and they want to keep it that way. So that's much more on the back end of the system, whereas how you control it, the touchscreen and everything else, that's a secondary issue in my opinion.
You bring up a good point, and I think this is where computing science could add a bit of insight to the marine business, because there seems to be the belief that to be not interfering with the system, you have to be physically isolated. So logic isolation doesn't seem to register in this. So basically we have some engine manufacturers and navigation manufacturers that do not allow you to even read their data, because they think it can corrupt the system and therefore put the system into jeopardy. Anyone wanting to comment on that?
Well, actually, again, back to industrial automation, because if I look at industrial automation, it has always had equipment for very, I would say, hostile environments. Take mining environments where you have acid, salt, water, humidity, heat, And they are using professional screens, they are using professional interfaces. So I would say, look beyond the obvious maritime cluster. You find definitely equipment, even based on open architectures from there. Regarding the front end, you posed the question, what is it like? Well, you can bet that in a few years, and hopefully soon, it will be highly context sensitive. That is, very focused on the user's personal preferences. You could, because again, if you look at the situation, you know where you are, you know what you are supposed to do, the system knows the context, and you know even who is using the system. So again, the simpler the better. You have one virtual button on wherever, and it says, do what I want. And really, how to reach it? We need to have those open platforms. And we need to have those open platforms which are linking the data to context. And if we are driving that kind of, again, as I said in the previous session, architectures driven based on situations, we can get quite close to again, I would say, the thinking of industrial automation. Let's say something goes wrong in a paper mill. Suddenly you have disturbance signals, millisecond after millisecond. And if you do not have those, I would say, intelligent filtering systems, you are drowned with misinformation. Okay, correct information, but you don't do anything with that because you get so huge amounts. So really we need to look at what is relevant in various situations. So again, the situational approach and simplicity is really the key. And you cannot achieve that without open architectures on the information level, on the meta level, and really also on the situational level. Take the example really on the harshest, toughest industrial automation environments, and how the decisions are made in those environments. And you I think architecturally are quite close.
I have a comment to you both, of course it helps to be approved by an authority in a class some way. I give an example what will happen. We had a guy on my small island, everybody works with sea anyhow, he's pilot, and which means that he comes on different ships every day, many times. And he asked me, how about this? And this is no advertisement for iPad, because I think others is good. How it works, Jürgen? Oh, it works like this and this, and how much it costs, and it costs nothing compared to others. What happens now is that he brings his iPad on classified ship and use that because it's so easy to zoom and zoom in and zoom out and where I am and what is the speed. And beside, he had navigational equipment for around maybe €1 million or something like that, at least. And he trusts, of course, he knows everybody, but he uses it. So the answer is that if the authorities or the classing company doesn't change mind, people will do what they own do. And then I think about, I don't know so much Apache, but people will do what they want to do. And I think about Google. If you don't are on the train is going. That was my comment. So we have probably to do as the classified and authority says, but we're going further by our own. And I hope Marsa will take this together and give the market a chance.
I think the right way to think about this is not how the UI should look like, right? Let this happen. Someone will invent alternatives and the best one will win, and, right? What you need to think about is what are the the base building blocks that you provide with the architecture to allow others to use and invent a new UI that is faster, nicer, more streamlined, whatever the criteria are, right? And I think you mentioned the communication between back and front end is one topic. I think there's a handful of standards that you can pick from. You need to think about how you enforce the availability of the pieces you need to create your UI, right? So which data, what data from which subsystem, available in what form, enforced for everyone to have access to that wants to go out and build an app, quote unquote app, because it's a, when you say app right now, you predetermine the OS, which I'm not sure you want, right? But some way to realize your UI out of the building blocks, and I think that is the layer you need to nail down, not the UI. This will happen, right? Because there will be people who say, there's this and this and this. If I combine it in that way, that works for me perfectly. They make it available, others use it, there's your UI. But you will decide how good the UI can be by offering the blocks. And if you miss some or they're not the right shape, the UI will suffer, right? So I think that's where you have to focus on. One, what is it? And two, how do you make sure everyone is forced to offer the information, right? Every one of those component providers, radar systems, right? Oh, I have a radar system, and whatever else I do, here is a data stream that I have to provide that everyone knows the semantics of, right?
Any other comments?
I mean, again, about classification societies, I mean, why are we so scared of them? Sooner or later, everything changes. Even, was it with the IOOS or VHF, Jürgen? Right. It's a very good example. It was impossible. All of a sudden, it's almost mandatory. It's no problem with it. And I think part of the problem with classification societies is that their in-house knowledge of software engineering is very, very poor. This is not where they stem from. But it's like the rest of the marine industry, but wanting or not, the change is happening. That's why we're here today. And as Jürgen said, people will just keep on doing whatever they want to do, and sooner or later, classification societies will realize, oh my gosh, all of this stuff, although not type approved, is being used anyway, so what are we going to do about it? Forbid it? Or are we going to look into it and think about, okay, well, is there some architecture behind it? What are the factors that we should look at so we can say something about the qualities and safety of such systems? I mean, they will have to look at it. I mean, we're recently even working with RINA about their green plus notation. That's another very, very interesting way of maybe not entering into those discussions via front door, but some kind of back door. There is this additional class notation, which is over and above the mandatory one, which is related to environmental issues of ships and yachts. And when it comes to super yachts, there's this, as we said, RINA green yacht plus, and you would have silver, gold, or platinum notation, the more environmental friendly you are. And we took the whole list. We met with RINA and we said, so what's in it? Because so far, I don't know, maybe even one or none, no platinum so far, because it's just so difficult, they claim, and so expensive, and it cannot be done. And we're thinking, well, but if RINA did think about it, this, let's say, very conservative society did make it up. They are suggesting it to the market. They must have thought about something that the rest of the market didn't think about. So we had a look at it, and it turns out that it is like a very simple thing that with MARSA can be really, really implemented cheaply, because it boils down to a collection of data, recording, and sharing it for other purposes. Obviously, if you think about it in one-off systems, it's not going to work. But if you have a backbone, if you have an open architecture, obviously this becomes very, very doable and easy to implement. We spoke with them and they said, yeah. And it's over and above type approval. And there we are. For them, MARSA becomes also a marketing tool for their additional class notation. So it's happening. So once they have realized that with sound software engineering concepts, they are actually, we're helping them out to promote environmental friendliness. Obviously, they will start thinking further, okay, so what is the next step? So that's where we are today.
Yeah, I have a short comment. We are not in a low-cost business. Anyhow, I have to explain for the people who are not familiar with the marine, one instrument is more important than everybody instrument in a ship, that is radar. We can have antennas and radios and satellite communications, VLAN and everything, but radar is the most important instrument. And we still don't have an app for that. That would be very easy, connected, for example, to an iPad. You need an antenna and a black box, and you transmit that data, because the radar shows us what happens just in this moment. So I have to make that clear. Then we can have a lot of different things. The only one who can take away the radar should be Google Earth in real time. Yeah. I want a commission.
No.
I guess it's becoming time to wrap up. We, as you see, for non-mariners, this class approval thing is that's where we get stuck in endless discussions. But we figured that there are ways forward, and we're now wondering if it would be possible for the attendees to think a little bit about what would your favorite takeaways be. What have you learned, if anything? What's your thinking about this? Are we heading in the right direction? What needs to be done? Those kinds of things. A few simple statements will be of great help and interest to us. Anyone wanting to start that?
I mean, for me, I think that the biggest takeaway is that I think it's kind of illuminating to see that when you start off with an idea of an open architecture, other possibilities arise that you may not have thought. For example, we go from an open architecture, what's available to that, to now we start thinking about the open data that the open architecture is able to achieve. Well, to have open data, that means you need to have some sort of reference data representation of that open data, which gets us to another phase. So, and these are all things that that MARSA and MARSEC, I think, are ideally situated to make impacts towards. So I think it's although it's easy to focus on the open architecture, and it certainly is important, always keep in mind that the implementation of an open architecture also allows for other growth opportunities, other areas where you can really impact the maritime industry.
I think the technical part is the easy part. Seriously. So the step to think about and agree, go open, opens the opportunities, and I think we've heard enough times that it seems to be the right thing to do, right? And now there is a long list of technical problems that are obvious, and oh, what do we do here? And I think that's not really the problem. I think the social aspects of this is the real problem. Right? Ownership of the pieces, legislation to enforce it, ways to track it, those aspects will be between having the blueprint and even a reference implementation and even a little dingy out there that doesn't show it's working, right? To the first 500 super yachts that run this thing, right? Will be a social problem. Ownership of pieces, commitment to maintain the data that we collect and not for cost or for cause, but whatever those aspects are, that will be the problem. I think technically this was, in my mind, the right idea to ingest into, a obviously convoluted set of bits and pieces that no one knew how to put together other than in a one-off response, right? I think you solved that. Now there's, yes, lots of detail and for lots of people, a lot of work to get everything right, fine. But start thinking about the next step. Now you have it, assume you have that thing, now what? Right? I think that is the biggest challenge. The technical thing, you're on the right track. It's my view.
Yeah, we fully agree. Actually, it's of course reassuring to us to hear that you agree that we have the framework, because that's why we also wanted now to have a serious input from the ICT and from the open source community, because if what we came up was too shallow or too fragmented or not following the right track, we wouldn't have any chance. We believe strongly that the next step will be what we call flagship projects. We started with the demonstrator to have something just that could be shown in very quickly, because if we put this into even our own test boat, it wouldn't be that easy to show it to 50 people. You wouldn't see a difference, so it would be testimonials, and people say, yeah, they say whatever they want. So now the question is really how to take those steps, get the flagship projects, and at the same time be able to reassure those owners that they are not going to end up on the bleeding edge, rather exactly opposite, that they are basically reusing proven technologies, so the chances that they actually, in the very first project, get a much stabler, much less complex, much more cost-effective system is very, very high. And if we can manage that, and we need multiple parties involved, that is a possible way forward. One thing we actually asked ourselves before the conference is that, is it so that MARSA and what we're doing could provide point of entry for non-marine companies and non-marine organizations into the marine market as well? Because that could be very interesting, that as Bror comes back to very often, automation, industrial automation is not very high on the list in the super yacht business, but if we had a platform where they could speak to more than one yacht, that could be very interesting additional market. So that's one of the theories we're testing out. See, could it be so that we can kind of demystify the very obscure and conservative marine market and provide a way for all kinds of organizations, including Google and so on, to have a vibrant activity there.
I have a comment to that. Actually, there are 2 points I disagree with, because, but you will realize why, because it's also based on what Bror said, looking into other maybe not so obvious domains, and it was around paper mills. And there is actually one super yacht manufacturer that stems from that industry and is actually still carrying out work in that sector. You know what that is? Perini Navi. And Perini Navi is the builder of most high-tech super yachts, sailing yachts. So the Maltese Falcon, Tom Perkins' boat, was built at Perini Navi. Then we also have one most successful small boat manufacturer, Bavaria. The guy who founded Bavaria actually started with making windows, not Microsoft Windows though. It was aluminum windows and plastic windows. So he thought, I have all of that equipment here, well, but I want to make myself a boat. And so he started. Now they're most successful producer of small sailing boats. So they became like Volkswagen of sailing yachts. So you see, that's actually maybe a very interesting point to look at these not so obvious connections and see in which direction we can bring it in our domain.
I suggest, I think this conversation was very, very interesting. I have to say I found it extremely interesting, like Jürgen. I think probably in the future it might be an idea to have more information from the skippers, because these people are the people that actually manage these systems, or they will be managing them. And I think it would be nice to get their feedback as to what the systems were, what they would prefer, what they are missing. And of course, the other thing I like about it is not just the technical factor. There is a safety factor involved too. Like you mentioned, the fog and the radar and stuff. And I wish you all the best. I hope it'll all work out.
I wouldn't be too concerned about, at least in my opinion, I wouldn't be too concerned about having to explain to the skippers and to the owners that this is bleeding edge if we're just starting. Because really, when you think about it, every system on every super yacht is bleeding edge, if you define bleeding edge as something that no one's ever seen before. And because every super yacht has different components, interacting in different ways in a unique fashion, they're all bleeding edge. This is a way of getting them away from the bleeding edge.
Just thinking about this. So what are the criteria for you for success? Right? What do you say this was a great thing down the road in X years or so, right? And I was thinking about the following. One of these conferences down the line that want a repeat of this in 5 years, say, 3, is how many of the providers of those subsystems flock around here and are eager to understand what it is they can connect into and who they have compete with. Right? I think that will be the proof point, which in turn is, I think, a point in case. Don't worry about the UI. Right? I think you need to worry about the guts of making that happen. The UI. The UI, the user interface, the how it looks on the surface, this will just happen. Right? But if you don't have the componentry and you don't have the manufacturer change the way they build their radar so that they can now interplay in your open framework, right? You have nothing.
This is a beautiful takeaway. You actually put 2 on the table here because we tend to agree. The reason we brought the user interface up is that that's what we often hear because that's what people see. So it's kind of that's where it's now this, frankly, iPad hype going on, which is kind of has very little to do with anything, as Jürgen pointed out as well. I think you're right, and I've heard from, it must be Jim, you said adoption, right?
Yes, adoption.
I think that's the key metric for us, for Marsa, is to monitor and facilitate adoption. Not market share and all kinds of, or sales, because we don't sell it. How many players, how many yachts, how many ships. So it's the adoption topic. And the other thing you put on here is that we've used this conference as a test case to see is there a need for such a conference and should you repeat it? Will there be an IOOS 2012? Will there be an IOOS 2015? Is this a viable way to drive the ideas, one of the elements to drive Marsa forward? Before I answer myself, we can maybe have some quick statements from the floor on that.
I have not now. I have a reflection after that. But anyhow, I take the reflection now. I was so impressed by you. We are used to faults all the time. We don't think it's normal at all. We have fishing nets in the propeller. Or we have to restart the
even
engine.
our demonstrator yesterday caught, the poor little boat caught a plastic bag in her propeller and the electric engine, one of them burned. 2, both of them. Oh, poor little thing.
And sometimes we restart the computer and you can double the system or 3 times. So that is no problem to us at all. And the other reflection, did you understand what I mean with the radar app? That one who invented that one will be, I think, a billionaire. But made it, it's not so difficult. I cannot do it, but I can see it in the future. That will be one of the most interested app.
That's the perfect example. You will not be able to build the app until the provider of the radar tells you what he's doing, right? And that will be what makes or breaks this. If you don't have the players providing components into the open architecture, you have nothing. That was my point.
We fully agree, and that's where we currently are, and it's not as difficult as it might seem, because when it comes to GPS and so on, that's sorted. But it's the radar app and so on, that's where we're heading.
Simrad, they have a developer.
Yes, there is actually one in Pleasurecraft. They have the so-called 3G radar, which is digital radar, high bandwidth radar, whatever they call it. They have just launched some months ago a developer's kit, open. And so that could be a very good student project for some MCAST people, or even for our own researchers to implement the Simrad broadband radar in Marsa as an example. Yeah, so we're getting there slowly. Okay, I think yes.
I think this has brought the discussion to really meet ends between what we're trying to do and what role open source would play. Because as you have rightly said, GPS can be GPS system can be interfaced with either text-based protocols, which are slightly open, or either binary, which would normally not be open. But there is a product, a GPS software, GPSD it's called actually, which can be used as a multiplexer of this data and make this data available over standard TCP/IP. We have actually used that same piece of software for the demonstrator. So here, open source will really play a crucial role in facilitating this process as well.
Okay, I guess it's time to wrap it up. We are ready to and prepared to announce that there will be indeed an IOOS 2012, because we can see that this has been so valuable for us and hopefully for the community, and we have a growing community of developers and contributors. And of course, if you could be helping us, all of you, to tell your home front, tell your customers, tell your contacts that this is actually a place we should go, at least to learn or to exchange ideas or try to shoot the ID down, or whatever the next year's debate will be. We think that's one thing that we really would like to do. We also got from Jim very good idea, namely for those keynote speakers and others that will be interested to participate in a discussion, that we stay in touch. So some month from now or two, we kind of hook up on a Skype or similar and say, well, what's up? How is this going? How can we help? How can we contribute? Have you made any other reflections? So we really would like to do that. We will put up some key findings. We'll actually look through our footage of the whole event and see what conclusions. We're not promising another Marsa manifesto, but some key findings, key takeaways will be posted for the community, so we can kind of have a conclusion within a couple of weeks' time on what did we learn at the IOOS 2011. I guess that's it, apart from that we have a gift for the keynote speakers, so we would like to get that. It's super young.